Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Never before in the history of sports podcasts have two men brought you opinion and analysis like these two. They speak for a city that's desperate for wins and titles, not whining and travesty. You might not agree with what they have to say, but you'll defend their right to say it. Sports fans across the world, from Chicago, Illinois, this is the Mac and Reed Show.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome into another edition of the Mac and Reed Show right here on the Barroom Network. And we are streaming live right now on YouTube. You can check out all our previous shows on Spotify, on iTunes. Remember to follow the Barroom Network at Barroom Network. And for now, the Elon Musk-owned Twitter, you can follow us at the Real Evan Mac. Ross will be paying $8 a month for his blue check mark. Follow him at Ross Reed. We're too broke for that. Come on, Elon. How you doing, Ross? What's going on?
I'm good. I'm definitely too prideful for that. I'm not fucking giving a guy that's a $75 billion, whatever he's worth,
basically
$8
the
a
richest
month.
man in the world telling you, yeah, pay $8 a month. I was here for all the responses to that. We got a lot to get to on the show. We won't be talking about Elon much, but a lot of Bears news to lead the show in, and real active at the trade deadline for once. Roquan, he's gone. Chase Claypool in. How about that? We'll recap other NFL trades throughout the league. And we got the Bulls looking good recently. We got World Series. We got Houston and Philly tonight twice. At Brooklyn firing Steve Nash and Kyrie just talking all sorts of nonsense. We'll talk about Takeoff's legacy. Is unfortunately he was shot earlier this week, and many surprises along the way. A packed show. There's a lot going on, Mr. Reed.
There is so much going on, right? It feels like the Bears' loss is kind of an afterthought to what happened this week up at Hallis Hall, right? I mean, it feels like ages ago, but it was just this past Sunday where the Bears did lose, a football game against the Dallas Cowboys, 49-29. In a game that, Dak Prescott had 250 yards through the air, Tony Pollard in relief of Zeke Elliott, 131 yards on the ground. The defense was absolutely deplorable in the outing. But the bright side was we saw Justin Fields really emerge and have a really good football game. He was 17 for 23, 151 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Thank you very much, Justin, with a quarterback rating of 120. And then he had 60 yards on the ground on 8 rushes for a touchdown as well. And that is the bright side going forward. And, I think the move that we saw this week, bringing in Chase Claypool, really signifies that the Bears are all in on Justin Fields and they're ready to build around him.
Big moves at the trade deadline, and certainly, putting a pin on that Bears Cowboys talk. The long story short is I do think that this Cowboys team has some legs to it. In the NFC East, we've seen how they're really setting the bar pretty high with the Giants play for once, and the Cowboys, now that Dak is healthy, rolling. And certainly the Eagles, who are still undefeated, who will test that record tonight against Houston. But the Bears, on the opposite side of things, putting up 29 points and for the second week in a row where they have a higher total. It's like, I believe you tweeted, Ross, if they can score 30 points every week in a losing effort, I'm all for it, because you got to put up points in this league. And I'm absolutely with you 100% there. And Justin Fields does continue to show some maturation, some growth, albeit with, he took 4 sacks, but he had a pretty hungry Dallas defense to go against. And it's been the same story for a couple weeks now with him being able to use his legs and make plays, extend plays. And whether it's Darnell Mooney or N'Keal Harry, he's really zeroed in on Darnell Mooney. It's reminiscent for me to last year where he did key in on Mooney. You want to see him spread it around a bit more. We know that obviously Cole Kmet has been nowhere to be found, but in that game, it's everything you wanted to see out of the offense, and then the opposite of the defense, which is unfortunate. But the younger guys are just going to take their licks, especially Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker in the secondary now, and Eddie Jackson too, who is now that undisputed defensive captain. As this past week, Roquan finally got his wish, and he's off to Baltimore, and the Bears again continue to rebuild, right? Because they're stockpiling draft picks. They get the Ravens' 2nd and 5th round pick for this year. He's the leading tackler for, in the NFL, and certainly for the Bears, and a great linebacker, no question. But the Bears are continuing this big rebuild in the way that you certainly should, which is stockpiling draft picks if you're not going to, and clearing up the cap space, which you are next year. Who knows who they'll try to go for to bolster this offense and defense. But it's all about continuing to build around Justin Fields. And I don't know if it's a question of which was bigger between Roquan and Chase Claypool, one going and one coming in. But Chase Claypool is certainly an addition that we'll dive into in a little bit here. But the Roquan departure was pretty predetermined. Just circling back to that, Ross, and how looking at the summer, he wanted out and then changed his tones, and people are making fun of him on Twitter because he's saying this was completely unexpected. Also, Roquan Smith writing the note and calling out the ownership and all this. He got what he wanted, and he goes to a pretty good football franchise again with good history at linebacker and a good defense overall. That defense is very loaded. He gets to play alongside Patrick Queen and Calais Campbell, a bunch of guys who are vets and they have legs, that Ravens team. But losing Roquan, it was the right move, and it was pretty predetermined that this made a lot of sense and a pretty good return, right, Ross?
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can probably go back to the offseason. You just got the feeling that Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus didn't really like Roquan Smith, and they weren't all in on him. They didn't want to pay him the money that he had the contract holdout. He doesn't have an agent. He wants to get traded, then he doesn't want to get traded. He shows up. He's had an up and down season. And quite frankly, Ryan Poles flat out told you this week, listen, this guy's an off-ball linebacker. He wants $20 million a year. He wouldn't budge on that. And, quite frankly, without an agent, I don't see how he's able to acquiesce to meet us in the middle. And so, Ryan Poles says that he basically was he played the hand that he was dealt, right? And even Matt Eberflus doubled down on that. They asked him this week, back when Eberflus was with the Colts and they had Quentin Nelson on their board, and he was like, if Quentin Nelson was gone, would you take Roquan Smith at that spot? And Eberflus basically, in all intents and purposes, said no, because again, he is an off-ball linebacker right now in this system. So, I wish Roquan nothing but the best. He was a hell of a player in Chicago. But there were a multitude of situations that kind of led to this. You can remember going all the way back to when he was drafted, right? He had a contract holdout then, which is fine. A lot of rookies do. Remember he had the playbook stolen out of his car. He had a crash car situation. He had he's on a boat with a porn star. He had the unfortunate.
Always a good look.
Yeah, absolutely. He had that really weird rape allegation from a girl in TikTok in South Africa. And it just was always, and then all the stuff that happened with this offseason, there was just so much there. And I just never got the feeling that this regime thought that he was a clear-cut leader and a very mature individual that they wanted to give $100 million to. And you know what? I actually applaud Ryan Poles for putting his feet in the ground and holding his stance and saying, no, we're not going to acquiesce to you. Have fun in Baltimore. Have fun. They got crab cakes there. They've got amazing seafood. You can live by the shore. Go visit the vacants like in The Wire, but have fun. And here's the crazy thing is, I don't think Baltimore signs him to a long-term deal either. Right. Yeah, everybody's like, well, now they have to sign him to a long-term deal because they gave up a 2nd and a 5th. Do they? I don't think so, because you still need to sign Lamar Jackson, who is significantly more important than Roquan Smith. But if they let Roquan Smith walk this offseason in Baltimore, then they get a 3rd-round pick for him. So essentially, I think they're looking at him as a rental for the last 9 games of the season into the playoffs. And maybe he can play his way into a contract there, but I just don't know who's going to give this young man $20 million a year, and the Ravens now have to deal with two guys on their roster who don't have agents in Lamar Jackson and Roquan Smith. And I think they'd rather deal with Lamar Jackson in that regard.
And one has a lot more leverage in Lamar Jackson being one of the best young quarterbacks out there. And like you said, pretty integral part. And Roquan, he doomed himself from the start with this whole not agent play and trashing the franchise. You paved your way out, and who knows, he could maybe get a bigger deal with Baltimore. But like you said, Ross, they have their own situation with Lamar Jackson. So it does look like a rental, and that was such an interesting part of that trade. The return, getting that second round pick and getting a fifth round pick, those could be pretty big. Certainly, as we saw, Ryan Poles made his mark in this last year. But the Bears, again, stockpiling draft picks where you need to. And then they ended up giving up a second rounder for Chase Claypool. Is there a part of you, just a pin on the Roquan situation? Mm-hmm. Is there a part of you that could have seen him staying? Was he that important? I certainly sided with a lot of people where he was, where linebackers in general, just linebackers, running backs really kind of get the short end of the stick, where you may play until you're 30 and play your ass off, but still never get that huge contract. I mean, everybody wants to be Fred Warner right now if you're a young linebacker, and he is certainly a great example of a great linebacker. But could you have seen him, being a long-term Bear?
You know what? I think if he would have came down on the amount of money that he wanted, it's a possibly. I think the Bears would have liked Roquan Smith closer to $17 million a year. But the fact that he, was in the 20 range, I heard from some little birdies that he was above $20 million a year. And that he wanted a little bit more money than what Shaq Leonard and Fred Warner were getting. And I think when you're at that level, and I think then when you have some maturity issues and new, a new regime, and it's probably coming from ownership as well, who has seen all these issues, that they are hesitant to give you that money. I just couldn't see it. And I think that luckily the Bears lucked out, and they were able to get something for him, right? Rather than just keep him on this roster all year and let him walk. I mean, listen, everybody's like, well, what the hell is going to happen with the defense going forward? And it's like, bro, did you not watch the game on Sunday? They gave up 49 points, and Tony Pollard put Roquan Smith on skates on one play to score a touchdown. It was not pretty. The Bears have one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL, and I'm not putting that all on Roquan Smith. Best believe I'm not doing that. But going forward, if you want $20-something million a year, you've got to be a little bit more better in that regard on and off the field. And listen, the focal point in this league is it's an offensive first league right now, right? And you've got to be able to put the pieces around your star quarterback going forward, and that's really what this is all about. If it's going to be a Roquan versus Justin Fields conversation, I would much rather build around Justin Fields any day of the week, twice on Sunday, than Roquan Smith. I feel like going forward in the draft, Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles can be able to find guys that can fill in Roquan Smith's shoes, right? Look how well Jaquan Brisker is playing this year already, right? And look how Kyler Gordon is coming on this year already, right? I think those guys have confidence that they're going to be able to hit some home runs in the draft. And they got over $110 million in cap space as well. And best believe they're going to be able to throw some money to guys like, Darren Payne, defensive tackle from Washington Commanders, and other defensive players to help mold this defense and make them look a lot better going forward.
Yeah, the focus has shifted, and a lot of Bears fans and just folks that followed the league very closely and this team called for the Bears to really, if you want to get out of the bottom of the NFC and bottom of the NFL, you're going to have to change that dynamic, that sort of philosophy that's defense first. Now you're looking, with the start was certainly that first domino to fall was Justin Fields, drafting a guy like him and where he is in the mold of the NFL quarterbacks, where you want him to be able to run, make plays, extend plays, and still have a rocket arm behind them. Now it's looking like certainly the offensive line is continuing to be shuffled around. And we've talked about wide receiver repeatedly, so let's talk about it again here, Ross. With the new addition of Chase Claypool, who is a young wide receiver with a lot of potential, and he's 23 years old. He's one of those bigger bodied receivers, 6'4". He could still run really quickly. I know Cole Kmet is excited, the fellow Notre Dame player that is on the Bears. There's a couple guys, but I'm skeptical. I know he has a lot to prove. He came from a shitty situation as far as the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh. But, the fact remains that he had that great breakout season in 2020 where he had 9 touchdowns. He still had a decent amount of yards in 2021. And then this last year, he was just sort of falling by the wayside, and Pittsburgh wasn't using him as much as you would think. I know the barflies in the comments are going off, and please continue to comment on in the chat. But I have some cautious optimism. I do think that he will challenge Darnell Mooney. I think that's good to have some competition out there, and I think it helps with the play calling. It just adds another depth of creativity to it, right? Where you would think this team is so run first, where hopefully in the second half of the season, maybe they'll try to air it out a bit more. I'm not saying gimmicky, but we've seen the Bears really don't throw it more than maybe 30 times in a game, something like that. And I just feel like across the league, you're seeing that. And Justin Fields needs those reps. So, circling back to your impressions of Chase Claypool, do you like the trade?
So I do like the trade, right? I was a big fan of Chase Claypool coming out of Notre Dame. And if anybody knows me, I'm not a big fan of Notre Dame prospects. Typically, I don't think they fare well going forward. I wanted Claypool, though, over Cole Kmet at the time. At the time, it was between Antoine Winfield Jr. for me and Chase Claypool, and then the Bears out there for Cole Kmet. Thank you, Ryan Pace. But going forward, I think there's a couple things that you have to look at to put this trade in perspective. The first thing is, Chase Claypool going back to his rookie season, right? 109 targets, 62 receptions, almost 900 yards, 9 touchdowns. That's a big one right there, right?
Yeah.
You look forward to last year, 105 targets again. Production dips, only 59 catches, only 2 touchdowns, right? But I think the big thing about that is look at the quarterback situation that he had in Pittsburgh the last couple of years, right? Boy, Big Ben was hanging on by a thread and had the noodlest of noodle arms that you could see in the entire league. And then you look forward to this year. He's got Mitch Trubisky throwing him the football. He's got Kenny Pickett throwing him the football. It just really was a disastrous situation, not only for him, but for all those wide receivers in Pittsburgh. You look at Juju Smith-Schuster, who's having a better year now that Pat Mahomes is getting him the football in Kansas City, right? I still worry about Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, who's already been, those guys have already been complaining a little bit with that situation. And so I think that the Bears are buying on a guy right now that is, believe it or not, still younger than Velus Jones, even though this is his 3rd year in the league right now. But he's been a guy that's been proven to be highly productive. He's a big body receiver that can go down the football field. He can make big plays. If you watched that game on Sunday and you saw freaking Dante Pettis and Equanimeous St. Brown just continue to drop passes when Justin is putting the ball down the field, or even not even fight for the football. When Justin's putting the ball down the field, you had to go out there and get a guy to be able to fill that spot. And it gives you more of an investment into Darnell Mooney, who is not getting the number one corner looks every single time now, getting blanketed by that situation, right? So it opens things up for Darnell Mooney, who's going to be able to see better spots open. It opens things up for Cole Kmet, hopefully, for him to be able to get the football more in space. I think N'Keal Harry needs to get on the football field more. And if you look out there, opposite Darnell Mooney, you got some big body receivers who can also get down the football field and make some plays. I think I like Velus Jones a lot more coming out of the backfield. I think he's a running back going forward that can occasionally line up in the slot and on the outside. But I like the trade. And then my last point on the Chase Claypool thing, and I think Ryan Poles touched on this. When you look at this draft coming up for wide receivers, there's some really good options in the first round, right? But after that, it takes a bit of a dip, right? And so if you're in the second round, there wasn't a wide receiver that was going to be on the board that's better than Chase Claypool. So why not buy him now, allow him to get the rhythm with Justin Fields over the last 9 games of the season, right? Allow him to learn this offense, allow Luke Getsy to get him comfortable in this situation, right? That's why I think it was a good win for the Bears.
It was a big win. Ryan Poles, a big fan of it, quote, said yesterday, "I've really liked the way that our offense is starting to come together and move. I like the way Justin is trending. I think adding another big body who's physical, explosive, great leaping ability, can stretch the field, but also is violent with the ball in his hands, as well as a blocker. I think that enhances everyone around him. He's a weapon, no doubt, right? And I just think you have no shortage on the offense. Adding him, that just really helps, not necessarily this year. It certainly it'll take a bit of time for him to learn the system. Certainly not Sunday against the Dolphins. You could chalk that up to another loss. But as time goes on, building chemistry, you can only imagine how these two will start to connect, you would think, when he's coming from that poor situation in Pittsburgh for 2 seasons, really, where he still had some production last year, but this year it was just a wash at that point. The offense, it is coming together. I think, the offensive line, when you're looking ahead to the draft, and we're talking about all these draft picks, and the Bears will finally have a first-round draft pick after the Khalil Mack aftermath where they'd given up those picks. Now they'll have a draft pick. It might be top 10. So you're really leaning heavy in on either big defensive tackle or offensive tackle, maybe. But I know they're offensive linemen, I should say. And you're really considering where to stockpile talent across this roster. But Chase Claypool, I do like the move. I think that it remains to be seen if he will mesh with Justin Fields. But we've seen the injury bug kind of bit the wide receivers on this Bears core. I think you hit it on the head with N'Keal Harry needs to step up, Ross, and now Darnell Mooney. That's another guy who you won't have as much attention on when he's out there catching passes from Justin Fields. Are you surprised that the Bears have not made any other moves at the trade deadline? Those were two pretty big ones, of course, but I thought you floated out maybe David Montgomery being gone or someone else like that. You surprised at all?
I'm not surprised. I don't know what you're going to be able to get with David Montgomery on the open market. I'm sure the Rams were probably the ones to come calling, but they probably wanted you to take Cam Akers back, and that doesn't make any sense. That's kind of an apples for oranges trade in that situation. I actually think right now, with the fact that David Montgomery is sticking with the Bears, I think that he will get a contract extension in the offseason. I'm going to be, I'm sure not the first one to call that right now, but I think there's enough money out there with the Bears cap space, and I don't think he's going to be expensive. If you look at the free agents coming up with the running backs and this year, it's a big list. There's some big names on that list headed up by Saquon Barkley. I think that allows the Bears to get David Montgomery back at a more team-friendly deal, and I like the 1-2 punch of him and Khalil Herbert, right? I like keeping those guys together. I think they're very good together. And then that's one less guy that you do have to draft. Now, if it does start to get a little expensive for Montgomery, then you're able to let him go. But let's say hypothetically it's 2 years, $14-15 million total, right? That's worth keeping David Montgomery around, in my opinion. And I do think that that's going to be what he's going to go for, because there are so many running backs on the open market, and obviously there's going to be running backs coming up in the draft as well. I just don't know who else is going to be lining up to pay for David Montgomery.
It's important now, if you're the Bears and any team around the league, you're seeing it as a running back by committee. And you got two pretty solid damn running backs there that can catch the ball out of the backfield. They're not afraid to break tackles. And David Montgomery, when he has been ailing, Khalil Herbert has stepped up, and vice versa. We've seen great games from both of them. They're a big reason why the Bears are at the top of the league as far as rushing yards per game. So this offense is trending up. It's obviously a big test against the Dolphins when they host them this Sunday at Soldier Field. And the Dolphins are looking like they're getting healthy at the right time. Some people even saying they have Super Bowl aspirations with Tua healthy, and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle just going to give the Bears defense nightmares. But if that offense is looking good, then it certainly looks like the plan is progressing. So I think that Ryan Poles is doing pretty much all the right things that we would expect him to do, right? Where he's not really hanging on to these old philosophies like we talked about with the defense and what doesn't fit into your philosophy. And the same thing with Matt Eberflus for now. And we'll see this year's a wash as a head coach too, but what he's able to do going forward. And certainly Luke Getsy having Chase Claypool, I know he is ecstatic as far as the offense is concerned. And Allen Williams, of course, he loses Roquan Smith, but this is, again, about getting more bodies. You were talking about his performance, Roquan's against Dallas, and it was a poor performance by the entire Bears defense. It takes 11 guys out there and then more. It takes the subs and nickel packages, different packages for different looks on the field. So it's still that rebuilding year. And this is honestly in the most positive direction I could have seen at the trade deadline.
It is. I was very surprised. I was surprised that they didn't sit on their hands and they did something that really enhances them towards the future, right? So now they got draft picks, they got a lot of money to work with. And now it goes back to Ryan Poles' mentality of best player available when it comes to the draft, right? Right now, the Bears are sitting at about 12th, I think, overall in the draft. But, I imagine they're probably going to creep back up a little bit. They'll probably be finished about 7th or 8th in the draft. But
top 10, yeah.
Yeah, but at this point, listen, because this team needs a lot of help, right? You can go top edge rusher if you want to. You need an offensive tackle, probably like a right tackle or a left tackle if you want to kick Braxton Jones to the right side. If you find a stud left tackle, maybe that kid from Penn State or the kid from Northwestern might be there. They need a 3 technique really bad right now, right? They can use the interior alignment. I don't think they'll do that in the first round, but there's options here that he's able to play with, and he can find a blue chip athlete. Or if things get really bad this year, let's say the Bears fall into the top 5 and somebody wants a quarterback, then you're definitely going to trade down to be able to recoup a first-round pick and let one of those teams take a quarterback, right? So I like the flexibility here, I like what they did. It's going to be exciting to see, I think, for the first time in our lifetime, a Bears team that's going to mostly be led with their offense and behind their stud quarterback. Justin Fields is the number 2 fantasy football quarterback in the NFL right now the last 4 weeks, right? He is putting things together right now, looking very, very comfortable. And, we've been killing him, so you got to praise him. Luke Getsy has been in his bag, looking a lot better as an offensive coordinator. And I feel very good about the continuity of this coaching staff with Justin Fields going forward. Right now, it's time to start to get a little bit of a rhythm going with Fields and Claypool and Mooney and Kmet and Harry and Herbert and Monty. And all these guys are young. And then it's time to find the pieces in the offseason to be able to build this defense back up and also this offensive line a little bit.
Yeah, let's see. Certainly looking ahead to Sunday because the season's not over yet, but the Dolphins bring in one of the top passing attacks in the NFL with those guys I mentioned in Tua and Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and certainly a different look at the running back. We'll see if Jeff Wilson starts and Raheem Mostert. That was a big move for them. I think that'll help shore up that running back position for sure. But now you're seeing the Bears hopefully looking to keep pace with these high-scoring teams, right? And we'll see Sunday how they're able to do it. I don't envy the Bears' defense, again, when I talked about those weapons that the Dolphins are going to be able to put out there. Do you think Chase Claypool plays any minutes on Sunday or decent minutes?
Yeah, so Luke Getsy did say today that Claypool will be on the football field on Sunday. He's probably going to be out there in a limited fashion. He's going to have a small package. Pause, no pun intended.
God damn it! I was what?
but he will be out there on Sunday in some capacity. Listen, the guy's 6'4" and 220 and can get down the field in a heartbeat, right? He can run a go route. He can run a go route at the very, very least. And it's going to be a beautiful day on the lakefront on Soldier Field this Sunday. The rain coming in is going to be on Saturday now, not Sunday. It's going to be like 61 degrees, just perfect weather. So get the ball in his football in his hands. I mean, because he's an important piece of this. It's not so much about the wins and losses for the rest of the season at this point. Is the development of Justin Fields and him being able to get the continuity with these weapons. So I hope he does get at least 20 snaps on Sunday.
Yeah, he's got to see a few series at least. It's like you said. If anything, just run a route and just try to get open, right? And he'll obviously learning the playbook will take some time, and learning that chemistry between him and Fields will take some time as well. But we'll see. Hopefully the field conditions are nice, and hopefully get a decent game out of it. And hopefully the Bears continue to score 30-ish points. That's what we need to be seeing. And Justin Fields continues to progress. And the Bears were not the only ones active at the trade deadline. It's the same story in the NFL with the top teams looking good as the Eagles look to remain undefeated tonight against Houston. Probably won't lose that game, but it could be a trap game. You never know. Weird things happen on Thursday nights. The Bills and the Chiefs are still jockeying for top of the AFC. Wheels have fallen off for the Packers and the Bucks, the old number 12s, but the trade deadline was a couple days ago. Let's talk about some of these moves. Robbie Anderson went to the Cardinals. I mean, we didn't even talk about last week about Christian McCaffrey going to the 49ers, and that's going to continue to make the San Francisco stock rise as Jimmy G gets a good weapon there and the rest of that team. James Robinson went to the Jets from the Jaguars. Robert Kuhn, we talked about going to the Eagles. Kadarius Toney, he might be a sleeper, like good wide receiver for the Chiefs there. That helps out that wide receiver room, which is already has some good wide receivers in there, some speed for sure. Roquan to the Ravens, we talked about. TJ Hawkinson. That's surprising that Detroit dealt him, to the Vikings. And then Chase Claypool come to the Bears. Bradley Chubb going to the Dolphins. Calvin Ridley to the Jaguars, and then Nyheim Hines to the Bills. Those are just some of the larger moves. What stood out to you the most as far as winners, Ross? I know a lot of people were pointing to the Dolphins, and that Chiefs move made a lot of sense, and McCaffrey was a big one. But anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, I was going to say it has to be the Dolphins because, the Dolphins – they probably overpaid a little bit for Bradley Chubb, both in draft capital, but also the contract that they gave him. But at this point, they're so all in. Who gives a shit? And they had to make that move, especially when you've got Josh Allen in your division. You're trying to take him out. And you've got Patrick Mahomes in the conference. You're trying to take him out, right? They're trying to put as much talent as possible around the 50. They're trying to put as much talent as possible within that 52-man roster to try and compensate a little bit for the one guy, which is Tua Tagovailoa, right? The one question mark on that football team. And he's been playing well. He's been outstanding this year. But what's he going to do in the playoffs? So I think they're just trying to stockpile as much talent as they can. It's very much the Jalen Hurts mentality, in my opinion, with what the Eagles are doing. And it's been working for them. It's working for both football teams. So and then they got Jeff Wilson from the 49ers. I think that's an underrated pickup because their running back situation has been abysmal all year. Mike McDaniel, the head coach, was the former running game coordinator for the 49ers before he came in. And Jeff Wilson was very, very successful when McDaniel was calling the plays. So I think for the sake of fantasy football, if Jeff Wilson is out there, you might want to pick him up because I think that those two guys are very much in lockstep. And I think the Dolphins are going for it. And good for them, right? They've got a lot of talent. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are two of the most dynamic receivers in the field. We're going to see them up close and personal on the lakefront on Sunday. And then the other piece to it was, guys like the Packers didn't do anything. They did nothing. They didn't bring in a wide receiver.
Talk about losers.
Right. The rumor was they tried to go after Claypool. They weren't able to match the Bears, obviously, because the Steelers thought that the Bears' second round pick would be a little bit better. But boy, they are really they're really in a free fall right now without not a lot of help. And I think they're going to be able to. They're not going to make the playoffs, in my opinion. I just don't know what they're going to be able to do. And then the other thing that stood out to me was a couple of those wide receivers that didn't get traded. Jerry Jeudy is still on the roster. I thought that he was a guy that could have been moved. Word was that the Broncos wanted a little bit more than the Claypool package, and they didn't get it. Brandon Cooks didn't get moved. I don't know what the hell the Texans are doing, but they were wanting the moon and skies for him when they should have moved him on from him. And now he's not even playing in tonight's football game. He's throwing a tantrum. So now you got a guy that's not playing on your team. He's on the contract this year. He's owed $18 million by your football team next year, and you're not going to play him because you didn't trade him. Huge miss by the Texans, who are going nowhere fast. They should have gotten something for him. If they got a second-round pick for him, they should have took it instead of asking for a 2 and a 5. And then, as like Heidi's mentioning, TJ Hawkinson is a big move for the Vikings, and good for them because Irv Smith is out for at least a month right now with an ankle injury. His production was up and down. TJ Hawkinson is a legit good tight end. And when you put him in that situation with Justin Jefferson on one side of the field and Adam Thielen on the other side of the field and Kirk Cousins is throwing you the football, he immediately jumps up into a top 10 tight end, and he's going to be able to make some noise in the playoffs. So, and I don't know what the hell the Lions are doing either because they just drafted that young man. I thought that he was supposed to be a part of the rebuild. And so at some point, are the Lions, are they in their fourth rebuild? I can't keep up. Is this the fifth rebuild? Like, what's going on here? Because now this just spells or smells like Dan Campbell, you out of here, homeboy, at the end of the season. This is a tight end coach that traded one of their best players, who's a tight end. Dan Campbell's gone.
Bears still stink, but at least they're not Detroit. I don't know what they were thinking with that move, and certainly your competition only gets better. And now Kirk Cousins gets another weapon to throw to, and TJ Hawkinson, who also has been pointed out in the chat repeatedly, is a good blocker, good all-around tight end, good player. I sided with you as far as the new faces going to new places, and Miami continues to trend upward. I think that's huge with Jeff Wilson, and that's going to be a good move to tandem him and Raheem Mostert, especially how injury-prone wide receivers can be as the season drags on. That'll help Mostert and Bradley Chubb. It remains to be seen. That's a big move for their defense and rushing the passer. Obviously, they just had the money to burn at that point to sign him to a bigger deal like that. But the Dolphins are really trending upwards at this point. And little moves like the Naeem Hines move. And I know that the Bills were trying to swing for Alvin Kamara, and that would have obviously been very big for the Bills. But don't necessarily need Kamara if it costs too much. So making little moves like that, that's what these great teams do, and that's how they separate themselves. What good teams do, again, great teams do, is they try to add something around their franchise quarterback. And the Packers, it's just been such a bizarre season. I mean, certainly we thought that this would be a big step down for Aaron Rodgers, not having any real help with the wide receiving core, and he'll have some injuries along the offensive line. But man, to not even try to get a Kadarius Toney or field calls for, I heard Chase Claypool name was mentioned in that conversation as well. It's completely surprising to me. I think of the losers of the NFC North, certainly that would be the Packers. And when you're looking at teams that have been trending downwards, like I mentioned, the Bucs starting this segment off, and the Packers, both were real quiet, considering you still have a franchise quarterback, and maybe you're just one weapon away or one offensive lineman away from maybe just helping out that team that much more. I know it's a whole roster and 22 guys out there as far as your starters are concerned, but that was so surprising to me.
It is. I mean, and this has been, the Packers' MO for a long time now. They just don't go out there and make aggressive moves, especially in the midseason. But this really was the year that they should have did it. And now we'll see what happens. I don't think this is going to end, very well for them and Aaron Rodgers. But you know what? Fuck them.
Yep.
Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? You've been sitting atop the division. You've had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks for some time now. You need to kind of feel what the rest of the world has felt and kind of sit at the bottom for a while. So hopefully this is the sign of the end, and it's hopefully the rise of the Chicago Bears, and we're able to overtake that and run the North for a while under Justin Fields, right? Sounds very Game of Thronesy, but let's take the North and
the House of Fields.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on to the 7 kingdoms for some time now.
And House Cousins. It'll go through. Looks like the Vikings. Vikings are certainly trending upwards, but it makes me very pleased that Detroit and the Packers are trending down. Looking ahead to this week, and we're more than halfway through the season now. We're right about that halfway point, I should say. Like we talked about, we got the Houston-Philly matchup, the doubleheader tonight. We got the World Series, and then we also got the Eagles taking on the Texans. I could not see the Texans beating this Eagles team, especially without Brandon Cooks. I know they're favored by 13.5. I'd be pretty persuaded to bet on that. But looking ahead to the rest of the weekend schedule, Packers, Lions, both jockeying for lower pole position in the NFC North. The games, the Bills Jets game, the Jets have obviously been the doormat for a while now, and we saw that they lost to the Patriots last week. But when you get into play like this is a pretty big test for the Bills, and they just had a big win against the Packers. I know that'll be a good game to watch. The Vikings and the Commanders still show a lot of fight. Now they got Taylor Heineke under center for them, so look out for that game too. Seahawks Cardinals, that when you get into that division, it's usually a good rivalry will come out of that. So we'll see Geno Smith and Kyler Murray face off. Rams and Bucks, another good one. And then the Sunday nighter, the Titans, man, they've snuck back into that conversation as far as pretty good teams in the AFC, albeit without Ryan Tannehill and without with a terrible performance by their young quarterback there in replacement of Ryan Tannehill, excuse me. But the Chiefs, it looks like one of those games where they're fresh off the bye. They should roll over them. What else are you looking forward to this week, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, first off, way too many teams on bye weeks this week. The NFL, for as many people as they have watching this situation, they need to balance these schedules out a lot more, in my opinion. And then, outside of that, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games in the noon window, and then 1, 2 games in the 3:25 window. How is that any kind of balance or anything like that? And I don't know if that's maybe they thought that Game 7 of the World Series might be on Sunday. It would be Saturday, hypothetically, if it gets to that point. But that's not good balance. But I digress. The matchup to me of the week is kind of a potential loser leaves town matchup, and that's the Rams versus the Buccaneers. That 3:25 football game. That game is in Tampa Bay. This is a rematch of the playoff game last year where we saw the back and forth between both teams. Tom Brady comes back only for Matthew Stafford to kind of throw that little Hail Mary pass against the blitz to Cooper Kupp to be able to win that game in overtime. I believe that went to overtime last year. But that's a big game for me because both those teams right now are struggling mightily. And something's got to give, right? I think Tampa Bay needs this game a lot more, even though they have the most winnable division, because right now, currently, the Atlanta Falcons are in first place, thanks to DJ Moore tossing his helmet off last week. But something's got to give with those two football teams. They are struggling big time right now. Cooper Kupp had an ankle injury last week. He's still going to play this week, but the Rams still can't run the football. They didn't make a trade for a running back. They've got one of the worst pass rushes in the league right now, despite the fact that Aaron Donald is on this football team and is and Leonard Floyd. And we've seen what's happened to Tom Brady. He's got a divorce now. He's talking a lot about work-life balance and how hard it is. He's on a 3 or 4 game losing streak right now. I mean, at some point, he's got to, right? The Bucs have got to kind of wake up and get this thing back together because they're still the favorites to win that division. They should still win that division, but they got to start getting some wins again, or else this is going to get really bad.
Yeah, 3-game losing streak for the Bucs, and on the other side, like you mentioned, the Rams not looking quite like the champs of last year. And certainly, the Bengals didn't look like that last week against the Browns. Yeah, should be another good week packed full of quality football. Probably not tonight. I mean, if you like the Eagles, they'll roll on. And then Ravens Saints, that's a sleeper for a good one. The Saints are just they're a confusing team over there. When you look at the quarterback situation, everything surrounding them, should be a good one. Yeah, it is tough. I know Cliff pointed out for if you're a fantasy football player for the bye week, says we see that the Browns, Cowboys, Broncos, Giants, Steelers, and 49ers are off. Yeah, you bring up a good point with that. Just the balance is not there. Certainly, there should be about 4 afternoon games, and then a couple less in the afternoon if you're going to play it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my theory is that they probably wanted one of these. They probably thought one of these early games would be a potential really good late game, or they thought that the Rams Bucs were going to be like, imagine they probably thought that both these teams would be like 1 or 2 lost teams, something like that. And so that's your big marquee matchup. When in reality, this is one of the shittier matchups of the week. I mean, everybody's still going to watch it, but for example, I think the other afternoon game, Seahawks Cardinals, might be a little bit more exciting, right? The Seahawks are a super fun football team to watch right now. And the Cardinals, I'll watch them anytime that Kyler Murray might yell at Cliff Kingsbury throughout the week. But I mean, your marquee matchup of the day, is it Bills Jets, right? Is that your division game? Bills best team in the conference right now, but the Jets right now currently are a playoff team. That might be your biggest marquee matchup of the day. You talked about
should be.
Yeah, you talked about Sunday night games. Sunday night games should be fun, obviously, but I expect the Chiefs to roll their asses. But this is usually what we call apple picking week. where if you need to go out and do the apple picking with the family or anything like that, this might be the Sunday that
Do
you
your
want to be
fall
doing.
things. Yeah, there
Absolutely.
you go.
The NFL not putting their best effort out there this week.
No, not so much. Switch focus to the Bulls, Ross,
Mhm,
and the
mhm.
rest of the NBA, of course. The Bulls winning 2 straight. Zach LaVine doing the heavy lifting against the Nets, who we'll talk about in a moment. And the bench doing the work against Charlotte yesterday as DeRozan and LaVine combined for 19 points, which was pretty unusual. But the bench was looking good. Goran Dragic, Javonte Green, and this core that has remained. The only real addition was Dragic over the offseason, big addition. And they string together a couple wins. I know, obviously, the Nets are just abysmal right now without Ben Simmons and what's going on both on the court and off the court. But then winning against Charlotte, trending a little bit more upwards, or is it still the same story for you?
Yeah, I need them to start getting on a little bit of a winning streak. I've been watching the last couple games, and what's encouraging is number one, Zach LaVine is playing back to back, right? So that was his first back to back situation of the season so far, which is a really good sign. The other really good sign is that Patrick Williams is starting to be a little bit more assertive. I tweeted out there yesterday that what he's doing right now is the lane that he needs to stay in, which is kind of a little bit of a dribble drive, a lot of mid-range game, a lot of cutting to the basket, a lot of what DeMar DeRozan does very well, just in a lighter version, right? And so if Patrick Williams is able to continue to do that, I feel much better about this Bulls situation, but they just need to stack some wins. It feels like there's very little buzz right now in the early part of the season because there's no consistency with the wins, right? They're 5-4 right now. So you kind of want to see them get some confidence underneath their belt and start to stack some wins. And we can start to get a little bit more of a buzz in this NBA season. I think the whole NBA season as a whole right now is just really flat. And I think it's really flat because of a lot of the off the court stuff that we eventually do have to talk about. Wojnarowski just tweeted right now that Kyrie Irving has been suspended by the Brooklyn Nets.
Huge bomb.
So is a Woj bomb. I feel like a lot of the off the court stuff in the NBA as a whole started with the Draymond Green stuff, right? We got the Kyrie Irving stuff.
Yeah.
Even like the Russell Westbrook stuff. It just feels like everything has been geared towards off the court right now in the NBA. And the NBA doesn't really get going anyway until around Christmas. But I don't think anybody is really in the mood right now to talk NBA or really get excited about it. But from the Bulls standpoint, just keep stacking some wins.
Yeah, it's still very early on. And the Bulls, you mentioned Patrick Williams and had a good game yesterday and an efficient game when he played 33 minutes and poured in, 17 points. And he was shooting very well overall and passing well as well. Just everything you want to see from Pat Williams, which we haven't seen recently in these Bulls games. But, you talked about the off the court issues, and Kyrie Irving obviously should have been suspended for that. But it goes beyond that for the Nets, certainly, too, who played the Bulls and were on the losing end. And firing Steve Nash after his blow up and after this poor start to the season, maybe it was predetermined. Maybe KD had something to do with it. Hiring Ime Udoka, like, good luck with that if you are taking the reins of that team. Jesus, the personalities and everything going on. But it's like you said, the vibe of both pop culture and of the sporting realm is dominated with these anti-Semitic stances that Kanye has taken on one side, and then you're seeing Kyrie doing this. Kyrie was obviously no stranger to controversy based on his flat earthing and not wanting to get boosted. This guy just, it really doesn't surprise you to an extent, but at a certain point, why do you want to play with this guy if you're his teammate? Certainly, why do you want to coach him? As transcendent of a talent as he is, he's just says some nuts things. He really is like a basketball equivalent of Kanye West to an extent here, and especially with the remarks or that they have had and viewpoints. So it's unfortunate. They're overshadowing, or Kyrie is overshadowing, and again the Draymond antics, they're overshadowing the Suns' great start, and the Bucks are still undefeated. No one's beaten them. Cleveland, looking in the division with the Bulls. they are that power to beat. They have some big title aspirations this year with a good team around them led by Donovan Mitchell. But it's very early on. Like there's only so much you can take away from it. But Kyrie rightfully should have been suspended. I'm surprised it took as long as it did. I feel like Adam Silver gave him that opportunity to outright apologize, and he did not take the opportunity. So of course Kyrie said, "All right, well, I'll be suspended."
Yeah, he doubled and tripled down, and so now the Nets are suspending him. They're saying it's going to be no less than 5 games. It might be more than that. To touch on this, I think it's a macrocosm of what we're seeing in society right now. Is listen, I've got a journalism degree. I have a degree in print journalism from Columbia College, and I was always taught early on in journalism school that if your mother said something or if she told you something, that you still have to go out there and vet that, right? You still have to make sure that that is true and do everything that you can to make sure that is true. And in these days, I think that we're seeing a lot of quote unquote information being passed off as something that's true when it's not. It's just propaganda. It's bullshit. It's not. It's false. We're in the Alex Jones era where he can go out there and say whatever he wants, and finally, guys like that are being held accountable. But everybody's got a platform from your Joe Rogans of the world to so on and so forth. And so many people are just spewing false information and passing it off as real, and that angers me so much. And that's my biggest fear with one of our favorite platforms, Twitter, going forward is allowing anybody, any Tom, Dick, and Harry to get a blue check mark and be able to just say what he wants and pass it off as factual information is really scary because it makes society all the more stupider, all the more ignorant, all the more volatile. And,
Sure.
and that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, there's no reason why we need to have these conversations, whether it's anti-Semitic, whether it's racist towards Black people or racist towards Mexicans or anything like that, or an urban market versus like coming from Oklahoma is a lot of information that I've seen, or even as stupid as if the fucking earth is flat versus if it's round. I'm just so tired of the misinformation. I kind of tweeted about this earlier, but the documentary is no longer the documentary. Like if you watch a documentary on Netflix, how do I know that's real? You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's my problem. In the past, when something was called a documentary, it's right there in the definition. It has to be factual. And now when I put something on, I have to assume that it's propaganda unless I find out otherwise.
The folks in the comments are questioning Kyrie. What did he say? It's not what he said. And Adam Silver put it very well when he delivered this sentence of a suspension. He said, quote, Kyrie Irving made a reckless decision to post a link to a film containing deeply offensive anti-Semitic material. While we appreciate the fact that he agreed to work with the Nets and the Anti-Defamation League to combat anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination, he did agree to donate $500,000, but did not say he's decided. I'm disappointed that he has not offered an unqualified apology. He did not. And more specifically, denounce the vile and harmful content contained in the film he chose to publicize. I will be meeting with Kyrie in person in the next week to discuss this situation. The commish has spoken. You got to use your platform for better, man. That's what it comes back to. It's tough. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but the misinformation is a big point that Ross said. Do you have a dog in the fight of Houston and Philly in the World Series, Ross? Also, can we use that expression anymore? I'm all in on Philly.
I as well. I'm a huge Bryce Harper fan. He should be wearing a White Sox jersey, but F you, Jerry Reinsdorf. You messed that one up. The guy wanted to come to the Chicago White Sox. You didn't want to give him the money, and now look at he's hitting bombs in the World Series. I'm a big Bryce Harper fan.
Yeah,
and for him to be able to pull this off with two different franchises right now is really impressive. I think a lot of people forget about Bryce Harper. This guy was on Sports Illustrated when he was like 16 years old, and he was given the mantle at that age. It was Bryce Harper and it was LeBron James. And for both of those guys to be able to live up to the hype from being 16 years old to now, do you understand how much pressure that is and how much that puts on you? And he has lived up to it. He's a Hall of Fame baseball player. He's on the verge, hopefully of winning another World Series ring with the Philadelphia Phillies. And I just think it's exciting. When that guy hits a bomb and it flies off his bat, it's one of the most electric things in sports right now. So I'm definitely rooting for the Phillies. Nobody likes the cheaters of Houston Astros. So it's been a fun World Series too. We got a no-hitter last night. Yeah. And so I expect tonight to be a really fun turning point game. I got the Phillies tonight bouncing back and getting on top and taking control of the series.
Taking control. I like it. Yeah, that combined no-hitter is something else, but you root for certainly the guys like Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber, not the cheating Astros, and Ross. Will anything else on the pop circuit that you've missed? Are you watching the White Lotus? Anything that we need to be watching at this point? I know the Thrones is gone. What you got next?
Yeah, I finished Game of Thrones. It was awesome. Great first season for House of the
Halfway
Dragon.
through.
Yeah, great season for House of Dragon. I won't do any spoilers for you or anything like that. I'm trying to come out of my horror movie bunker that I was in for the last 30 days leading up to Halloween. I watched Barbarian on HBO Max last week, which is a very popular horror movie. So now I'm going to shift my focus. I'm trying to see. I need to finish Industry, which is another great show on HBO. I did enjoy season 1 of White Lotus, so I'm going to start kicking off the season 2 of White Lotus, and then I need to start the final season of Atlanta, which is something I need to jump into right now.
It's pretty good. I'm a few episodes in, and I've been enjoying it. Donald Glover has been bringing it, and it does not disappoint thus far. It's very out there, but the direction of every show, just every episode, feels like a mini movie. It's pretty impressive stuff. And all right, go ahead.
We're 1 week away from Black Panther: Wakanda Forever.
Oh my
too.
God. Yeah, absolutely. And we just saw the trailer for the what was that, Ant-Man versus Wasp, and see King the Conqueror. Forget to check out Science Fiction, by the way, folks. That'll be coming up later. But RIP to Takeoff, who was unfortunately shot at a party earlier this week and died on the scene. And he was 28 years old, 1/3 of the Migos. He was recognized by the other two members, Quavo and Offset, as the best lyricist of the group, and he was certainly the most low-key and soft-spoken one. But man, he had some of the most memorable lyrics in their songs. And you think of Culture 1, 2, and 3, and how they just took them to the stratosphere, and how a kid who was 19 when they did Versace, and then to now how far they've come. And he did his solo album, and he was preaching about how careful you have to be on social media and Drink Champs when talking about rappers who were getting shot, like all the other ones who we've lost unfortunately over these past years. But Migos as a group, they're huge for hip hop, and Takeoff, obviously related. Quavo was his uncle, and cousins with Offsets too. So real sad for his family. It was just so senseless at this party, a Halloween type of party at this bowling alley, for this to go down like it did. But he's, even at 28, he solidified his place in hip hop, certainly with the work he did with the Migos, the soul album, the vibe, just everything. And they took the trap music to a different stratosphere. It was certainly part of that, along with Gucci Mane and the rest of that Atlanta scene. So big loss.
Huge loss. I think I was the Migos was one of my guilty pleasures. I've seen them twice in concert. It was very fun music, but a lot of people joked on the group's rap skills as a whole, but you can't deny what they did in hip hop over the last 10 years. They have some massive hits, and they really put it on. For that new Atlanta is what I call it, right? Kind of the rise back up of Atlanta. Also guys like 21 Savage, who's dropping an album tomorrow with Drake, are kind of in that group. But he was the best rapper in that group by far. And if you go back and listen to a lot of their work, Quavo and Offset were a little decent, right? Fun guys. But when Takeoff got on the mic, you can tell that he was the one that really had the most skills in the group, which is why it was his idea to start the group. He went to his uncle Quavo and said, I think we should do this. And they were able to come off the streets and be able to start this group. Just absolutely brutal, senseless situation. It always reminds me of when 50 Cent would say, I got to a certain point in my life and the amount of money that I made that I wasn't able to keep going to the same places anymore, because I knew I was going to lose my life, because too many people were watching me. Jay-Z has a great song called Streets is Watching. And you have to be able to, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're a rapper or anything like that, when you start to reach a certain level, you cannot move the same like you used to. And if you do, unfortunately, it could be your demise. And so to see a young man who is, had a lot of money, is very successful, lose his life in a freaking dice game. It's a dice game. It's I hate to see that even him and Quavo were even in that environment. I hope this is a lesson going forward to not only young rappers. It seems to happen more to young rappers than any other musical genre on the planet, but just people in general. When you start to move and mature in life, be mindful of the rooms and the situations that you're in, because it can really save your life going forward. The goal of every day is for you to make it home by the end of the night. I don't care what else you have on in store or planned. The number one goal is you need to make it back home that night, and I hope that people realize that going forward.
That was well said, Ross, and certainly Takeoff in those circumstances a lot after his loss. The NBA community, the whole sports community, all other musicians came out and support. One of the most interesting points was kind of to your point, Ross, was what Deion Sanders said to his football players, and talking about how you have to separate yourself from these guys who you grew up with, man, because you're not like them. You have a different status. You got to like shut yourself in. And he in that speech, he said, no one's leaving the hotel. All right. But it's that sort of situation, right? Where it's you want to not change yourself completely, but you have this new status and someone's gunning for you. And it's eerie that he had pointed that out on Drink Champs too, and how this had happened, but should have been avoided, obviously. So rest in peace, Takeoff for sure. But double down on Phillies tonight, the Eagles. We are out of time. Thanks to everybody for watching, listening in. We appreciate it. You've been seeing it. If you've been watching on YouTube, at the bottom of our screen here, remember to come out to King's in Rosemont between 2 to 4, and you can meet all of us, Aldo, Dan, perhaps Mike North. Ooh, is he confirmed now? And Ross and myself, John Buffone. Thanks for supporting us as always. Thanks for all the interaction today, to everybody who was active in the chats for sure. Remember to follow us on Twitter. Follow me at the Real Evan Mac. Follow Ross at Ross Reed. Follow the Barroom Network at Barroom Network. If you've missed any of our previous shows, check them out on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. We are out of here. Hit that like button, y'all, as Toa said, and be good to each other out there. So long, everybody.
Peace. See you Saturday.